Welcome to the Intrazone Roadmap Pitstop August 2021 edition. This is a bonus monthly show that answers that burning question in your mind: what's rolling out now for SharePoint and related technology in Microsoft 365? I'm Mark Cashman, Senior Product Manager on the Microsoft 365 marketing team, here to help set the ongoing record straight. This month, I talk with my friend and colleague Vesa Juvonen, a Principal Program Manager on the SharePoint team, focused on all things OneDrive and SharePoint development, and an excellent Microsoft 365 developer community lead. You'll hear Vesa describe the recent modernization of the SharePoint App Store, plus SharePoint framework updates and insights to what it all means for Microsoft Teams. Beyond the dev updates, we'll focus on everything that landed this month, a few related items, and always two fun teasers looking into next month. This episode is your 30-minute meditation to namaste ahead of the ever-curving roadmap for Microsoft 365. Okay, are you in the mental lotus position? It's time to kick back and get informed about what rolled out in August 2021. Let us start with employee engagement, making sure that all those experiences for one-to-many are a two-way street and always engaging. First up, Teams meeting recordings are now saved to OneDrive and SharePoint, moving away from storage in Azure Media Services. With this switch, meeting recordings become more integrated with Microsoft 365, which equates to faster availability of the meeting in on-demand playback, improved sharing controls, including external sharing capabilities, improved video management, advanced compliance and governance, and more. There's a great video that I'll link to called What's New for Microsoft Teams Meeting Recordings, where you'll get a lot of great insights and visually see the product. And I will link to additional information, including the new documentation. Next up, within SharePoint Spaces, the text and annotation styles have been improved. Now, when you create and use text styles in the text web part, and when you use styles to customize the 360 tour icons, this means you have a little bit more control over what the text looks like and what are some of those annotation styles when using SharePoint Spaces. It already looks great in a third dimension, but it also looks really nice when it's a little bit closer to the style that you want to present in Spaces. Next is really what we're going to talk to Vesa about. It's how the SharePoint framework is getting more and more updated, plus the new modern experience for the SharePoint Store. So set a little context. By using the SharePoint framework, you can extend the user experience with custom web parts and extensions in SharePoint. And now it gets easier to both acquire and deploy apps in SharePoint. This is great news for developers, partners, and customers. I'll have a link in the blog and in the show notes to a detailed blog that Vesa Juvonen wrote. But you know what? It's so much better hearing from Vesa directly. So let's pause and hear more from Vesa himself. So it is now that time where we actually reach into folks that are building the product, people designing the product, people are listening to feedback and then actually doing something about it. And it is now time to talk to Vesa Juvonen, who is a Principal PM Program Manager in Finland. And he is really worldwide in terms of his impact. He works with the community nonstop all over the place. So without further ado, let us welcome back to the Intrazone, Vesa Juvonen. Vesa, welcome back.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. Really cool to be back.
Only because I know a little bit around August. A lot of people take vacation, and you took a pretty good sized vacation. So welcome back from vacation.
So I have to say that in especially in Northern Europe, because summer is warm and it's really, really bright and sunny is here, we're going to take all of our vacation as a big bunch in the summers. We had a good trip in the northern Finland, we have a summer cottage. It's an area called Lapland, for those who do not know the northern Finland and the area, but it's really nice to be not around around people. Coming back on what you were saying, that it's meeting people and doing community 24/7 pretty much, and that's what I do. And then feeding that information to the product group and then helping to specify some things because my historical knowledge of SharePoint, which is pretty long as well. But it's every now and then it's super then nice to have a few days away from not seeing anybody.
I know that feeling, and I know from what I know that you do, you definitely deserve it. So congratulations for taking that time off.
Thank you.
And I also saw that as you were coming back online, either was a retweet or just a reshare of an old photo of the first time, maybe one of the first times that you took your shoes off, which is quintessential Vesa when you're presenting.
True, that is true.
But maybe was also the first one when you really were starting to plug into the community as a lead because you were doing the MCM, which still I can't even imagine that program as far as being an attendee and actually making it through it. But fun to see that photo again.
Yeah, I was a bit skinnier on that photo. That was from 2010. I think, what was it, 12 years ago, 11 years ago. But the MCM being the Master Certification Program, and which used to exist. So it was the highest level of a certification, which you can do. But then as we gradually started moving to the cloud, we were unable to keep the training material up to date because, hey, it's evolving. Every single day we're shipping something. So it would get insanely difficult to keep the training material and certification testing and all of that in place. But in that picture, I'm standing on a podium, and the presentation without shoes really comes from the fact that when you don't have shoes on, I can jump on a table. I can do whatever I want. Well, I wouldn't jump on a table with shoes on because that's wrong. So
I get it. Well, so for the rest of this, I'm just going to take a second here. I'm going to kick off my shoes. I'm not going to jump on the table, but I now am shoeless and ready to talk about SharePoint Framework and what you're doing to make it so that what people do with the SharePoint Framework is easier to get out there to their customers.
Yes.
So let's talk about the SharePoint Framework a little bit. I can see from my own viewpoint and vantage point, of course, internal and external, I can see that the SharePoint framework is growing in both use, in maturity in terms of what you can do with the framework. But how would you summarize maybe the last 3 to 6 months of SPFX from both innovation and how people are actually using it?
3 to 6 months is a relatively short time frame, but because we only had one public release during that time, we should have more, and we're working on making the process more streamlined. But basic idea of what we want to do with SharePoint Framework is to extend that way above the SharePoint. So SharePoint being the content services, and it's also the application hosting services for Microsoft 365 as one of the options. And then we're targeting the SharePoint Framework to really work on seamlessly with Microsoft Teams. So you can build Microsoft Teams tabs and personal applications, and there's a lot of investments on there, trying to figure out the meeting applications to be more streamlined and all of that stuff. We'll talk about that a bit later maybe on this call. And then also the Microsoft Viva has a really big role. So the extensibility, UX extensibility in Microsoft Viva connections can be done with SharePoint Framework. And what we're trying to do with that is just bring the same industry standard tooling, web stack tooling, TypeScript, and all of this classically used technologies, and then you can extend Viva, Microsoft Teams, and of course SharePoint. Not going to take SharePoint portals and that experiences away as well.
So with connections, and maybe it's just sort of with this recent instantiation of what SPFX can do and where you can apply it, you mentioned web tools and that extensibility beyond what we thought of as the past deep expert in SharePoint development. Now it's really more the web developer. And that's been true for SPFX for a while. What does Viva Connections require, I guess? If it's not different, maybe it's the same story, but is there anything as we move into something that is a SharePoint-based solution running inside of Teams where it requires something new?
Well, technically it doesn't require new. We're adding new shapes of the SharePoint framework, so to say. I guess we can call them shapes. So first of all, you can extend the Microsoft Viva desktop using SharePoint framework with parts and extensions like we did in the portal. But then more importantly, as we're introducing the Viva Connections mobile experiences, which is targeted for first-line workers and for anybody to really easily access your day-to-day work with any device or mobile device. So you don't have to go to the portal. You see an overview or on your business situation easily in that mobile experience. Those mobile experiences can be built with SharePoint Framework. So we're introducing a new component type, which is then targeted for the Viva Connection mobile. And those component types will be also visible in the desktop view. So if you're accessing the Microsoft Viva Connection desktop using the Teams, you'll see those components as well, but they are primarily, also targeted for mobile.
The mantra that I remember from more than 3 to 6 months ago was build once, but deploy into multiple locations. Multiple locations meaning at the time SharePoint and Teams,
yes,
but now also spans web, desktop, and mobile. And of course, there's a lot of intricacy. That's an overstatement.
Yeah.
But if we talk about that from an acquisition and a deployment perspective, how do I get these apps? How do I put the apps out there? And specifically, just a reminder, we're talking about the apps and experiences that are built with the SharePoint framework. What are we doing this month or have been doing that now is being released this month that makes that all easy for people to acquire and deploy?
Within the past month, we released the first version or first steps of modernizing the SharePoint Store. So if you go to any of the SharePoint sites, as an example, then you add a new page or click the add an app, and that will redirect you to a new modernized experience where we can also easily access the SharePoint Store. So traditionally, SharePoint Framework solutions and SharePoint add-ins actually as well have not been really bought through the store, but the store has existed. So quite a big percentage of the extensibility has basically always been in a way that the customer contacts the partner and then they're acquiring that solution through there. Maybe due to historical reasons, we haven't invested on the SharePoint Store for a pretty long time. So I'm not going to go to technical details there. But we're finally doing that. So we want to make it super easy for end users to, first of all, find the solutions. And then if you're an end user, because of the nature of SharePoint Framework, which says you need to have an administrative permission. If you're an end user, you can request the solution to get acquired by the administrator. And if you're an administrator, you can install the solution from the store as well. But this is what we're seeing right now is really the start of a longer journey where we're modernizing the whole app acquisition process. We're looking into introducing end user acquired solution potentially, which are then isolated slightly differently. We're streamlining the experiences with Microsoft Teams, so you can acquire a SharePoint Framework solution also for Microsoft Teams Store. All of this kind of the Teams Store, SharePoint Store, Office Store, and then are then backed by the app stores, and we're streamlining that process as well. So we want to make it super easy for partners to promote their solutions also in the app stores and in the specific stores, and then for end users to either request or acquire the solution, depending on the solution style.
So the SharePoint Store is all about where you put your apps and or where you go to get apps. Just to be clear, it is not where you go to get SharePoint socks.
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We should actually have a location for that.
I'd love to deploy my first SharePoint socks. I have a couple of pair that I've already deployed, but they're very beta. So yes. I'm glad that they're getting modernized. So you mentioned partners, and that's kind of where I was interested as well. Whether somebody is internal developer that's obviously making apps available to the rest of their organization, or if it's more like a ISV that's building and doing that more at scale for a lot of customers. What does it mean, this better store experience from a developer or a partner perspective?
So in the past, basically as a partner or ISV, when you were investing on extensibility, you were basically selling your solution through your website and through your promotional channels, so to say, and with the store being more integrated and more easily accessible by the end user, it was pretty nicely hidden in the past. It was actually a pretty horrible experience. I can probably say that. But now you can much more easily access and find the right solutions from the store, so that the partner, as they're submitting their solution to the App Stores and SharePoint Store and Team Store as well, the end user can find what's available. So it will be this kind of a marketplace to promote the store as well. It probably will never take away the objective of having your own website and promoting through that as well and having a direct deals with the customers, but we want to make it sure that it's still an option where we can expose the awesomeness of what our partner ecosystem is building with SharePoint Framework or with any other technologies across the Microsoft 365, and in this case, really targeting the SharePoint experience. So there's a lot of interesting scenarios in plans, and let's see which of them are going to be available. So making it even more easier to have access on the goodness of ISVs.
A lot of the customer value you might have already stated within the value of partners to be able to not only get their apps out there, but to be able to find their apps and do that more easily. Is there anything that you would say specifically to a Microsoft 365 customer that is why this store has been modernized, the benefits that they will see?
So for them, I think the key point here is that quite often people are, that there are areas where we are intentionally not investing from a Microsoft perspective, and we consider those as a partner opportunities. And some of those areas might be productivity improvements for the customers, and using the store then help to find those different offerings. And that's the easiest way then to find what's available and make it and read details around all of the different options what the partners are providing. So from an end user perspective, going to the store, I think it's a great opportunity to go there, have a look. You can acquire potentially the solution, or you can at least be aware of what kind of ISVs and partners and offerings are available, and then potentially contact them directly. That is absolutely an option as well. Really, the key here is to make the connection between the partners and customers, so the ISVs and the customers, so that we can make that communication channel more efficient. We help them to acquire new customers. So
yeah, and I hope that a lot of the work does translate, that it's easy to find and then easy to transact. And transact could be just download and try or buy.
Exactly.
But really that notion of being able to find it is probably that first hurdle.
Absolutely.
And obviously to support our ecosystem is tantamount, because they are already working with our customers and we should just make it easier.
Absolutely. And good thing to know also, by the way, on that one, we do not take any cuts on the work. So we're kind of promoting this partner for free because it's the right thing to do. Partners is the lifeline of Microsoft and being from a day one, of course. So we want to make sure that the partners get additional value by offering, by us promoting their offerings. And we do not need to have a 20% or 30% cut on those sales. So do that.
I think that's a fantastic decision. You mentioned earlier that there was a team store, and in your blog that I'll make sure to have the link in there so people can read more about the details and, of course, get to the documentation if they're getting to that point of releasing their app or doing whatever it is to build the app. But can you explain this quote a little bit more? You said, "We are working on a better integration for the Microsoft Teams targeted SharePoint framework solutions." It sounds like a little bit of a teaser. You mentioned the Teams store. What are some of the things that you could share today that we're doing to make that integration even better?
I think we can be pretty open, and that's my kind of always been from my characteristics of actually talking about these things openly, because I think it's important that people understand where we are investing and what is the direction. In general, SharePoint Framework is being used by third-party, so custom SharePoint Framework extensibility is being used by tens of millions of people worldwide every single month, which is just massive. It's just huge. And we want to make sure that since the platform SharePoint Framework has been super successful in the SharePoint, and it's growing to be successful all the time, the metrics are looking really good for Microsoft Viva, and also the usage in Microsoft Teams is growing. We want to also make it sure that it's easier for the partners if they use SharePoint Framework for providing or implementing their experience to offer their solutions directly in Microsoft Teams Store. Because right now we're in this a bit of a, let's say, a restrictive model, where as you are a partner and you're submitting your solution from the partner center, you need to say, is your solution targeted for SharePoint, or is it targeted for Teams, or is it targeted for Office? Which is actually kind of silly when I think of it. Why can't the same solution be targeted to every single platform? And that's what SharePoint Framework is already providing in the Microsoft Teams and Viva and SharePoint perspective. And we want to make sure then that the partner center submission pipeline supports the multi-targeted things. So you can have a SharePoint Framework solution both in SharePoint and in Teams. And also as an end user is acquiring the solution in the Teams, we need to make sure that the engineering magic happens behind of the scenes, that the end user doesn't really, or the person who's acquiring doesn't need to know what's the technical implementation behind it. But currently there's limitations. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's always work to be done and lots of learning. And with different platforms comes a different learning curve, but then to optimize for it to be the same or similar. If I could use Twitter as a leading indicator, which I know even sounds like a dangerous thing, but I've seen a lot of what you work on maybe originally from a Twitter handle was characterized as SharePoint development. Then it moved to Office 365 development. But most recently, it's been characterized as Microsoft 365 development, which is not just an easy way for us to bucket our messaging. It is actually what you're working on, what you just said. And then throw on top of that the fact that we went from Office Graph to Microsoft Graph, and now more real than ever, not just a name change. That's a lot of moving parts and pieces, a lot of teams coming together, and of course, a lot of expectations out in the market that what you and the team are doing with a lot of other teams translates into, for others to be able to keep up with it. You have a wonderful community that you're a part of and drive, in a recurring fashion. You mind just a couple sentences on how people can get engaged with that community?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been running the community work. Well, actually, we started open source within our community work, and that originates from SharePoint in a before GitHub and before Microsoft even was in a GitHub and all of that stuff, which is actually kind of cool. But that's all now getting more and more evolved to be a more holistic Microsoft 365 platform message, like you were referring to. It's not just SharePoint, it's not just Teams, it's not just Viva, it's actually Microsoft 365 developer holistically, because quite often the solution is not just a one specific application. It takes advantage of both. It might be a Power Platform component and all of that. So thinking that more broadly. And that community, so our Microsoft 365 Patterns and Practices community is basically targeted on helping to provide samples, documentation, videos, you name it, promotion, articles, all of that stuff for end users, well, primarily for the technical people, so developers and the architects and technical decision makers. And the easiest way to get started and find out the massive amount of assets and samples what we have is to go to the https and akms/m365pmp. And that's basically our community landing page. We have at least 2 weekly community calls. We're starting a new Microsoft 365 developer weekly product group call, which basically means that the Microsoft people will be presenting once a week about the goodness of the platform. And then we have a separate community demo calls. And if people are looking into getting exposure for the samples and work what they've done, they can sign up for doing a community call demos, and all of that stuff is then helping other people to succeed and helping other people to be successful in the platform. We're just really trying to facilitate this mentality of, sharing is caring mentality. So as much as possible, helping people to share their learning between the others, because from other people, we learn. It's not necessarily always the documentation, which is the best piece of source of information. It's by seeing somebody else explaining that we needed to do this kind of a business requirements. We implemented this kind of things. It came to be this one. And then that sparks additional ideas. And, that's really cool. And a lot of those samples, which we see in the community call, are open source. So they're available from a GitHub, and then you can pull it down, you can play around it, you can install that to your Microsoft Viva Connections installation or deployment and all of that. So really making it easy for people to get started on building things.
Fantastic. I hope that everybody in the audience sees that there's a way to either get building, get acquiring, get deploying. And Vesa, thank you for sharing and caring on the Intrazone.
Thank you.
It's really nice to hear. It gives me a better sense of what you all are working on. So hopefully on your behalf, if I ever get a question or talk about it, I talk about it better. But for our audience to understand what Microsoft is doing to make it so that they can build custom extensibility into their solutions on top of the platform in a way that is going to be stable, in a way that's going to be innovative, and of course, in a way that a lot of people can engage in. So it's really great to have you here. And kudos to you and the team for the work this month.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having us, having me. There's nobody else in the room.
You represent a lot of people.
Well, that's true. Technically, that is true. And that's actually a good point to call out as we're closing. And obviously, none of this community work is just me or individual people. There's hundreds and hundreds of people being actively involved, helping others to succeed. So in the August summary, I think we had 253 external community contributors within the past month, which is a lot of people being active and helping, so which is great.
Now that you are all fluent on what it is the SharePoint team is up to make it easier to acquire and deploy apps and all the goodness that the SharePoint framework is and will be, let us move on to teamwork. There are two new features for Microsoft Lists from the iOS app perspective. The first feature is you can now adjust a column's width. The resizing of columns gives you the ability to control the information density on your iPhone or iPad screen. Simply tap and expand or contrast the width to see more or less information in each column. The second feature is you can now search via QR code. This enables a unique way to discover more about an item, say something like a mouse that you want to check out from your IT team. Just start up the Lists app for iOS, go to the list, click search to search for that item by scanning by QR code. Once it registers, the corresponding list item gets highlighted, open the item, update it as need be, and you're done. It's really nice to see what the Microsoft List team is doing for iOS. And a little insight here is I am starting to test internally on an early beta on the Microsoft List for Android. So if there are any Android users out there, we are making good progress and we'll have a lot more to say towards the end of the year, but on track for what we listed on the public roadmap for the Microsoft List for Android. Next up, file cards in the Office app for Android. File cards offer a rich and modern way of consuming your Office content with inline previews, contextual information, such as the person who shared the file with you, and quick actions on the card that allow you to share and keep the file offline. As part of this rollout, file cards with previews will be available for your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and PDF files stored in your OneDrive accounts. One note, Word and PDF files that are stored directly on your Android device will be supported in a future update. Our last feature for teamwork is universal print integration with OneDrive. Admins can reduce or eliminate on-premises print infrastructure and move their organizations to serverless printing. Now people across the organization can access a printer in the cloud from anywhere with an internet connection and securely print over zero trust networks without the need for a VPN connection. This feature allows users to print directly to their organization's printers from OneDrive Web for work or school without needing to install any printers on their devices. People can select a document and click print. They will see the print dialog where they can search for and select any printer in their organization that they have access to. So that is one drive more reason to minimize the server footprint on premises. Let us rub our hands together now and delightfully talk about related technologies. This first one is really for developers, but I think it's important to also see the direction that Microsoft is going when we start integrating different technologies. The Yammer Topics API is changing. Yammer is integrating with and adopting Vesa Topics to make community knowledge more accessible across an organization and support a consistent experience in Microsoft 365. Vesa Topics brings together knowledge from across Microsoft 365, knowledge sources being SharePoint, Outlook, Yammer, and more. So this is an API FYI. To achieve this, Yammer will need to make some changes to its topic APIs. Some API changes apply to all Yammer networks, while others apply only to networks in native mode. I'll link to a helpful document that gets into the specifics, but nonetheless, the changes enable you to continue to take advantage of what's going on in Yammer through topics, especially when you leverage the Yammer APIs for custom integration and extensibility to the value of this knowledge network as it coalesces, so that you can build what you want and use the knowledge where you want it. The next related product and technology is Reading Progress in Microsoft Teams. Reading Progress is a free tool designed to support educators in creating personalized reading experiences that build confidence and reading fluency in their students. Built into Microsoft Teams assignments, Reading Progress passages are easy to create and differentiate for impactful instruction. Reading Progress saves teachers time while capturing audio and video reading fluency. It also helps students practice reading out loud in private. Reading Progress also provides insights and analytics to educators. This works on all platforms, including desktop, Mac, web, iOS, and Android. To put the use case in a better perspective, here is a nice quote from an educator in Florida. Quote, "Reading Progress takes all the nerves out of my students' fluency checks. They are comfortable with its approach, and I am able to collect data quicker and more efficiently than ever before. Now I can devote more time to differentiated instruction rather than individualized assessments. This quote is from Joe Merrill, educator at Lake Park Elementary in Lake Park, Florida. It's great to see him getting those benefits, and it's great to have this technology out for the education space leveraging Microsoft Teams. So get those reading progresses progressing. Okay, now it is time to close your eyes and visualize the future that's just around the corner in our calendars. Here are 2 teasers for what's coming in September 2021. Teaser number 1, an updated web player for video and audio files across Microsoft 365. Internally, we call this effort One Player, and this update brings variable playback speed, skipping forwards and backwards, and a pop-out playback experience. Teaser number 2, viewing the transcript for a Microsoft Teams meeting recording. This means you can read and review all that was spoken from wherever the meeting video is being played back from. That's it for the teasers. This next month is sure to be full of a lot of news, and a lot of effort is going into making it a great month. But for now, we'll just leave you with the teasers until next month. We've added learn more links per feature, plus a list of important resources in the show notes and in the corresponding blog post on the Microsoft Tech community published to the SharePoint community blog. I hope you've enjoyed this restful roadmap pit stop. You, my friend, are all caught up. If anything still leaves you scratching your head, open questions, or concerns, please send us your thoughts and comments to theinterzone@microsoft.com. We're here to put our and your best change management foot forward. Thank you for taking that step with us into the cloud, month after month, especially this month of August. Until September becomes something we wish to remember, this is Mark Cashman saying, stay safe out there on the roadmap ahead.